Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Buckeye Big Rican pregame live here on the Big Rican YouTube and Facebook page. I am your host. I am the Big Rican, and I'm going to start with this. I didn't think I was going to get to do this show today because of everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks with Ohio State. Just to recap, last week's game against Illinois was canceled due to positive COVID tests in the Ohio State facility and on the team, including head coach Ryan Day, who is not in East Lansing today. He is not there. Larry Johnson, as I said in last weekend's Buckeye Big Rican's Big Sunday, Larry Johnson will become the first African American head coach, interim or otherwise, in Ohio State history. And it's going to be a rough one. It's going to be a rough one. Now, Sparty's always a tough out, whether they're 2-3 or 3-2, it doesn't matter. Sparty is always a tough out. In East Lansing, they're even more of a tough out. Will be limited fans in the stands, so let's see what happens. So we're going to get into today's game. I want to talk a little bit about the changes that's going on in Sparty's program over the last year, and then I want to get into what I think is going to end up being the Ohio State game plan today. We still don't know what players are available and what aren't. I have not seen an update on that as of yet. So let's get a sip from the mug. Big surprise, right? Me, lunatic Ohio State fan with an Ohio State mug that I drink out of. Could you find anything more easy to figure out? All right, so here we go. After last week's cancellation, Ohio State comes into this game 4-0, needing the last two games against Sparty and that team up north to get into the Big Ten championship game, and then, I believe, win that and get into the college football playoff for the second consecutive year. Let's start here. Sparty's got a new head coach. Mark D'Antonio was there for forever. And it is actually a Mark D'Antonio former assistant that is now the head coach at Michigan State. And that is none other than Mel Tucker. And everybody says, Mel Tucker, I've heard that name before. Where have I heard it? We've heard it a couple of different places. If you've watched the Big Ten as long as I have, you heard it at the University of Wisconsin, where he played defensive back in the early 90s. I believe he was a teammate of Ron Dane's. Possibly. No, Dane was a little later because he graduated in 94. He then was a graduate assistant at Michigan State. Then he went to Miami of Ohio. Then he went with Nick Saban. He was a GA at Michigan State with Nick Saban. Then he went down to LSU with Saban to be the defensive backs coach. And then he came home. And where did he go home? Mel Tucker went to Cleveland Heights High School on the east side, literally 2 suburbs over from where my parents are currently. He was the defensive backs coach on that improbable 2002 Ohio State National Championship run underneath defensive coordinator Mark D'Antonio. He's had a great career. He was the co-defensive coordinator a couple years later for Ohio State, then went and became the defensive backs coach and the eventually the defensive coordinator under Romeo Crennel for the Cleveland Browns. He then was with Jacksonville, was an interim head coach there, worked with the Bears for a couple years, went back to Saban as the associate head coach and defensive backs coach in 2015 when Alabama won a championship, was the defensive coordinator and D-backs coach for Georgia for a couple of years, and then, of course, was the head coach of Colorado in 2019 and came home in 2020 to Michigan State. So, listen, Mel Tucker's got a great resume. What he doesn't have yet is a team that is built to win now. Rocky Lombardi's been great under center. He had a huge game against the Wolverines. He threw the ball very well. The one thing about Michigan State football you could always count on is they would have a quarterback who wouldn't make a ton of mistakes, and they'd have a dominant defense. That's how Ohio State didn't win back-to-back national titles in the CFP era, because Michigan State beat them at home with a dominant defense and a quarterback who didn't make any mistakes. Lombardi is prone to turnover. He is prone to bad decision-making. So I think that's where the Buckeye defense under Kerry Coombs is going to have to make their hay today with a depleted roster. I'm actually going to throw up on my phone here and see if we can find out who from Ohio State is not playing. So bear with me 1 second here, guys. All righty. So see here, we still don't have the exact number of players or who is actually going to be in this game. So hopefully we'll have that for you very soon. I wouldn't really count on it because the Buckeyes are playing this pretty close to the vest. So what is going to be the Buckeye game plan today? Well, here's the good news. Justin Fields is healthy, and Justin Fields is in East Lansing. He's getting on the plane last night. They had the picture. So hopefully he will be ready to work his usual magic and shake off a rough play against Indiana. They're going to have to lean on the running game, I think. I am hoping neither of the two wide receivers are ill. First and foremost, so they're not ill to begin with. They're not sick or injured, and they can play. I like the microphone on this one better. Give me a second. Let me plug back in. I don't know if anybody saw, I was on with Tim Jones on the Times Q Weekly Fantasy and NFL podcast Wednesday night. Talk a little bit about talk a little bit fantasy. So always a fun time if you get a chance to listen to him. Great insight, he's really good at what he does. So going back to today, we're going to need a defense that shows up. And the thing I worry about with today is that big game Rocky already had against Michigan because he threw the ball downfield, taking advantage of matchups, getting the ball to his playmakers in spots where they could score. Listen, Sparty has put up top points this year. They're going to point out what was against the Wolverines. And yes, it was a rivalry game. It was this. Here's the thing. Michael Penix is a phenomenal quarterback. He just torched this Ohio State secondary for nearly 500 yards 2 weeks ago. This brought me pause when we had the week off. Ohio State cannot be susceptible to the big play today. They need to do the thing I preached about both them and the Cleveland Browns ever since the season started. They need to win the line of scrimmage. They need to win the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. If the offensive line is at full strength, they need to run the football with Master T and Trey Sermon. They need to give Justin Fields time. On the defensive side of the ball, Jonathan Cooper, Tommy Togiai, and Haskell Garrett have to be in Rocky Lombardi's face in order to get this game won. Because next week, hopefully we get Coach Day back, hopefully we get some more players back, and you take on the Wolverines, God willing, who are having their own issues with COVID right now. That will throw a huge monkey wrench into my plans for next week with the show. And of course, next Saturday, outside of being my son Zachary's birthday, it would have been the 118th play of the game. 117th play of the game between these two epic rivals. So let's see if we got any more information. Ryan Day can assume coaching on Monday. So that's a good thing. Yeah, it's not showing anything else. Yeah, it's not showing anything. Even Cleveland.com, a couple of recent reports. We'll have to watch to do their post-game shows either from the Horseshoe. I have on my YouTube playlist a post-game show from the National Championship Game 2015. So I don't have a list of the guys who were there. But then let's get into what we know. Let's get into what we know about both programs. Here's what we know about Sparty this year. They have played a couple of tough games. They have beaten some good. They've beaten Penn State, and no, they haven't played Penn State yet. They beat Michigan, which was big for them. They dominated Wolverines since Harbaugh got there a few years ago. They have played pretty good defense. They have given top points. They beat Northwestern for their second win. Northwestern is the outside favorite to play the winner of the Eastern Division in the Big Ten Championship game in India in a couple of weeks. How Ohio State can undermine his wrong word, how he can attack the defense. Well, you have two wide receivers in the regular season will both be over 1,000 yards without breaking a sweat in Garrett Wilson
and a Chris Olave, the quarterback who's going to be a Heisman finalist most likely, even though he had his worst game of his career that 2 weeks ago, in Justin Fields. You have a pair of running backs who loves the ball, and the other one who can make dynamic plays on the outside in Master Team Trey Sermon. If the offense is healthy, and these guys are healthy, this team can win this game. They can win it pretty easily. They can win it pretty easily. And we can go into rivalry week with that same intensity we need to get past the rivalry game. Now that's if it happens. This is going to be a tough game. Like I said, they can win it easily. They are 20-plus point favorite. Vegas has not changed their lines in this game. I just don't know if they're going to cover. I don't know if they're going to have enough juice in the tank to get this thing done quickly. I think that will benefit everybody in this case. If they can both race this thing in the first half and the beginning of the second half, rest your starters. Play a defense where you're not going to give up a ton of points and have to put the starters back in. This is going to be a tough one just because of what's going on. The predictions are really hyped up. I'm ready to go. I am very, very nervous about what will happen this afternoon. It is going to be an old school Big Ten throwdown today because it's not going to be pretty. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think it's going to be ugly. I think the team that wins is going to have to win somewhat ugly. But listen, in this season, you win, you move on. That's the way it's got to be. So you want Ohio State to win this game? Let them win by 2 scores, and let them win by 20-some points like Vegas is saying they're going to. I just don't know if they have the weapons because I don't know who's playing. Hopefully we'll know more from between now and the start of the game. So the best thing about 4-0 is we have a chance to get to 5-0. I think Ohio State is 5-0 today. But it's going to have to be done ugly, like I said. The defensive line is going to have to dominate the line of scrimmage. The offensive line is going to have to dominate the line of scrimmage. This is going to may have to be 3 yards in cloud dust today. I don't know how else to get it done, depending on who's hurt and who's not, or who's on the COVID list and who's not. That's all the insight I got for today, guys. I mean, honestly, this is a tough one to look at. I mean, introducing Mel Tucker was great. Talking about Roger Sparty, great. Discussing how Ohio State can get this done. I just got this funny feeling about saying I'm excited they're playing. I'll be pumped. I got some stuff I got to get done here at Homestead, but I've been told I have the game up, so that's cool. So just a little bit more of what's upcoming for Big Rican in the next couple of days. Tomorrow we will have our Browns pregame in the biggest game in a while against the Tennessee Titans. Next week, I am going to do a special episode on my predictions for the 2020 Major League Baseball Hot Stove, where I see players that are going to wind up where, including some of the moves that have already been made. Forthcoming, because we are on episode today. This episode is number... This is number 89, tomorrow's number 90. We are 10 episodes from the big one. The 100th episode. I never thought I'd get here. This is crazy. Friday, December 11th, this coming Friday, if it is happening, as soon as we know, I will know, will be the fanatical preview of the 117th playing of the game between the Ohio State Buckeyes and that garbage team up north, the Michigan Wolverines. As always, Big Rican can be found here, YouTube and Facebook, on Twitter at Big Rican on Sport, on Anchor, Google, Spotify, Breaker, Rocket Cast, and Radio Public. As Google's trying to do something over the top of Anchor right now, what is going on? They really thought it was option. That's hysterical. So just to recap again, we can be found on YouTube, Big Rican on Sports, Facebook, Big Rican on Sports, on Twitter, at Big Rican on Sports, Instagram, which I'm actually getting back into, Big Rican on Sports, and of course, Google, Spotify, Anchor, Breaker, Radio Public, and Podcast. As a proud member of the Entire Speed Podcast Network, have a great Saturday. I will come to you tomorrow with Browns pregame. OH.